Most people have heard by now about this really nasty custody battle and divorce between Joe Jonas and Sophie Turner. Because it involves a lawsuit now with Sophie claiming that Joe has abducted his children, a lot of people have sent me articles and videos about this situation, wondering if some parental alienation is going on. Parental alienation is a type of abuse and domestic violence that often occurs during a divorce or custody dispute. It usually involves one parent being really angry at the other parent and attempting to brainwash, manipulate their child to reject their other parent in order to hurt the other parent. However, in this case, the children are really young. They're 1-year-old and 3 years old. It's a bit different, I think. However, that doesn't mean that some aspects of parental alienation, or at least severe alienating behaviors, might be occurring. If there is some parental alienation going on in this case, I think it's really important to recognize it, because parental alienation, more than anything, really hurts the children. So I'm going to do a deep dive of this case and analyze whether any alienating behaviors or full-fledged parental alienation might be occurring. I've watched a lot of commentary and read a lot of news articles on this case, and it seems as if most news outlets and commentary are siding with Sophie Turner. During this video, it is my goal to give a more balanced view of the situation. This type of abuse is so insidious, and it's quite possible that it's not just one of the parties that's at fault here. It is possible that both parties are alienating each other from their children. I have to start with a guilty confession. Around the age 12-13, Joe Jonas was my major celebrity crush. Along with millions of girls across the United States, I just loved this guy, and I regrettably attended more than one Jonas Brothers concert. It was my guilty pleasure. If you don't know Joe Jonas, he's 1/3 of a really successful boy band called the Jonas Brothers, who even appeared in a Disney film called Camp Rock. They've been in the spotlight since a very young age. They've just been super popular. Plus, Sophie Turner, hello. Sophie Turner, she plays Sansa in the Game of Thrones. She's an excellent actress, in my opinion. So as a previous fan of both Joe Jonas and Sophie Turner, to hear in the headlines, Sophie Turner sues Joe Jonas to return their 2 children to England, and Joe Jonas responds to Sophie Turner's claim of withholding daughters, my initial response was just internal screaming. No, no, no. And I hope this is not true. It sounds like parental alienation, but I hope this is not true. But after reading so many of the articles, which all of a sudden there happen to be hundreds, I have to admit, allegedly, that if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, that it's a damn duck. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's go back to the start of their 7-year-long love story. In 2016, Joe Jonas and Sophie Turner made their very first contact. In a true millennial fashion, Joe Jonas sent Sophie an Instagram message. Out of the blue, introducing himself. During an interview in March 2019, Sophie said that they were talking a few weeks and then they finally met in person for the first time just a few weeks after their initial contact in London. In separate interviews, both Joe and Sophie have described their first meeting as intense, unique, and somewhat of a love at first sight type of meeting. Sophie described their relationship from the start as easy and that they were both all in. She even said, "Soon we were inseparable."
When did you realize, you go, oh, I think I'm gonna marry Joe Jonas?
The first night I met him, I remember, he left my apartment, and it may have been the alcohol, and I remember him leaving, and I just, wept. I wept to my brother. I was like, I love this man so much. And I knew, and that was it.
Shortly after meeting in 2016, Sophie began going on tour with Joe Jonas. New Year's Eve 2017, the couple finally made their relationship public. After that, things seemed to move really fast. By July 2017, the couple had met each other's families and their parents. By September 2017, Joe and Sophie adopted a puppy together. And finally, 1 month later, in October 2017, both Joe and Sophie announced their engagement. By all accounts, this was, from the start, a whirlwind relationship. They seemed to be very swept up with each other and moved very fast. I've seen some commentary saying that this is signs of a narcissistic abuse type of relationship. I'm not claiming that. I don't think there's enough evidence to claim that. But I do think that this can highlight some of the dangers when you get married so fast and have kids so fast with someone that you honestly don't know that well. Problems before their marriage. There were a lot of red flags and issues that these two were having before they even got married. I might get some hate from this in the comments, but I need to mention something that Sophie was really passionate about sharing in 2018 when they had just been engaged for a month or two. Sophie told Marie Claire magazine that it's lovely to be engaged, but there's this weird misconception that being married is the greatest thing that'll ever happen to you. She said, but I've always found that my career is something I work for. And when I achieve something, there's a difference. There's a sense that this is the greatest thing I'll do in my life. When this article in Marie Claire magazine was published, fans and society altogether praised Sophie's statement that work can come before marriage. Now, this took me off guard a little bit, and I'll tell you why. And I know a lot of people will not agree with what I'm about to say. My 2 cents. Career goals, your passions, hobbies, accomplishments, and overall satisfaction outside of one's marriage. All of these things are essential for both parties to be able to retain their own identities and cultivate their own lives outside of the marriage. That's great. That being said, I believe that 2 things can be true at the same time. Life for each individual in a marriage, outside of the marriage, can be so valuable, and it's important to cherish that and cultivate that. At the same time, however, it is my belief that the marriage must be given the same priority and value as one's life outside of the marriage, which in this case for Sophie is her career. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Maybe it's because I had 2 parents with a horrible marriage and awful custody dispute and divorce. Or maybe it's because of my own mistakes I've made in my own marriage and the mistakes I've learned from. It's my personal belief, and it's only my personal belief. But I do believe that if you're not willing or able to put your marriage first, especially if you have children, the children will suffer. All kids really need from their parents, when it comes down to it, is for their parents to love each other, and 2, for the parents to unconditionally love their children. That's a long way for me to say that, to me, Sophie prioritizing her career before her marriage that she hasn't even been in yet. Maybe Sophie wasn't looking or wasn't really aware of what a marriage entails. On a positive note, on a Dr. Phil interview, Sophie actually claimed that Joe Jonas had helped her sort through an identity crisis and her depression. Undeniably, however, the biggest red flag during their engagement has actually been revealed in a more recent interview. Sophie Turner revealed that she and Jonas actually broke up 1 day before their wedding. Sophie Turner said that they were both stressed out and not feeling good about the wedding, but they decided to go through with it anyway. Why? She said that they went through with the marriage so as to not disappoint friends and family. This is so problematic. When you're getting married, it's not about that day. It shouldn't be anyways, about that 1 day, about the party, the guests, the events. It's about a lifetime together. The wedding is just a celebration. What you're pledging to each other is to be united for the rest of your lives. I don't blame her for this, but I really think that Sophie didn't know what marriage entails. And maybe Joe didn't either, if they were broken up 1 day before their wedding and then decided to go through with it so as to not disappoint people. Let's talk about their marriage. After having 1 wedding in Las Vegas and a 2nd wedding in France, the celebrity couple kept up their whirlwind quality of their romance by giving birth to their first child, Willa, just 1 year after tying the knot. Joe Jonas, on an interview with CBS, opened up about fatherhood.
It's quite nice, and so it's changed me a lot. I think it's made me for the better. And ultimately, as a bandmate, you're a little bit more emotional with these songs that you're writing and the things you're going through, the stories you're telling and you want to share, and the relations that you have around you.
And on their 2nd anniversary, Joe Jonas posted a photo with the caption that read, "It's been the best 2 years of my life." And then, of course, this is a whirlwind romance. Let's get going. They didn't wait long before having their 2nd baby. July 2022, the couple welcomed their second child together, another baby girl. Fast forward to August 2023. Sophie was seen cheering Joe on at the opening weekend of the Jonas Brothers tour in New York City. August 15th, Sophie celebrated Joe Jonas's 34th birthday with an Instagram post where they seemed like everything was good in paradise. And then, again, this August, Turner and Jonas actually sold their mansion in Miami for $15 million, just 2 years after purchasing it. And then, out of nowhere, bam, divorce. September 1st, 2023. Jonas hired a divorce lawyer. TMZ broke the news of the upcoming split, claiming that the couple had been having serious problems. Although the couple had been seen in public just 3 weeks earlier, appearing affectionate with each other. In the petition for the dissolution of the marriage, Joe said that the marriage between the parties is irretrievably broken. This might be interpreted by some people, myself included, as like something big happened, something was discovered. What comes to mind is some sort of adultery or some sort of really big betrayal of trust. I think that's part of the reason why this case has been so intriguing for so many people. There are a lot of unanswered questions. I also want to mention that in this petition that Joe Jonas made to ask for a divorce, it states that it's in the best interest of the children for the couple to have shared parenting responsibility. So right away in the petition that Joe Jonas and his lawyer put forth, they acknowledge that it's important for both parents to retain their parenting responsibilities. Shared parenting is what Joe Jonas is advocating for in his initial petition. Here's where it starts to get ugly, and here's where we can really see, in my opinion, aspects of parental alienation at play. The first indication for me, as someone who's lived through parental alienation as a child, that it's at play here is how many incongruencies there are between the claims that Sophie Turner is making and that Joe Jonas is making. For example, Sophie has since stated that she was not informed about the divorce by Joe Jonas, but that she discovered the divorce through the media. Yet, Jonas insists that she was informed. A lot of this becomes he said, she said in court, and it's starting to get really messy for these two. The two actually released a joint statement about their divorce. And I don't think that the irony was lost on many people. They stated, after 4 wonderful years of marriage, we have mutually decided to amicably end our marriage. There are speculative narratives as to why, but this truly is a united decision, and we sincerely hope that everyone can respect our wishes for privacy, for us and our children. Who are they trying to fool? As you're about to learn, nothing about their separation, divorce, and custody battle has been amicable. Nothing. On September 9th, Joe addressed his split from Turner and the rumors briefly during one of his concerts.
I just want to say, look, if you don't hear it from these lips, don't believe it, okay?
While Joe Jonas blatantly asked his fans to disregard the tabloid speculations, Sophie Turner has taken a more covert, roundabout approach when handling her divorce. Just days after Joe filed the divorce petition, Sophie decided to meet up with one of Joe's most notorious ex-girlfriends, Taylor Swift. I hesitated to even bring Taylor Swift into this conversation because I know how divisive she is. So many people absolutely love Taylor Swift, and Taylor Swift actually is not playing any role here. It could have been any of Joe's ex-girlfriends. So please, Swifties out there, do not come for me for what I'm about to say because I'm not blaming Taylor Swift here. But like I said, Sophie decided to meet up with Joe's ex-girlfriend. They were seen and photographed in public, going to dinner and having drinks arm in arm. And now I know that some people will find this appropriate and think, okay, that's understandable. Sophie's the victim. Sophie was looking for support from someone who understands what it's like to be with Joe. What's wrong with that? And I hear where you're coming from. Here's my response, my opinion about why this is inappropriate and even potentially manipulative. Number one, could Sophie have not gotten support from literally anyone else in the world? Anyone else except for one of Joe's ex-girlfriends, particularly an ex-girlfriend who has raked him through the coals, writing songs about him and his poor character. Number two, okay, Sophie decides to call up Taylor Swift, Joe's ex-girlfriend, and maybe rant or try to find support, but why did she have to do it in public? Was it appropriate for Sophie to choose to meet Taylor in a public area where she knew she would be photographed, even going so far as to display public affection with Joe's ex-girlfriend? I don't know. A lot of thoughts come to mind. Was this an innocent meeting? If so, why didn't it happen behind closed doors? I even start to wonder, could Sophie be trying to get under Joe's skin by publicly meeting up with his ex-girlfriend just days after being given a request for a divorce? I think that most people can agree with one thing, and that's that Sophie had to know that by meeting with Joe's most notorious ex-girlfriend, it would set the internet on fire. Or at the very least, she had to know that this would get under Joe's skin, possibly enrage him. And that, to me, is evidence that Sophie is angry or maybe feels very betrayed, and whether justified or not, that she is trying to hurt her ex-husband. To be fair, many have claimed that Joe has been on a smear campaign trying to hurt Sophie too, via TMZ, to destroy her reputation by questioning her mothering abilities, her lifestyle, and hinting that Sophie might have done something incriminating on a Ring camera. If Joe really was involved with giving this info to TMZ, that's disgusting. However, this can neither be confirmed nor denied, given that TMZ's purpose is to spread celebrity gossip. By the way, I'm not saying this is absolutely true, I'm just saying these are my impressions. A lot of people want to view this as a cut and dry case and believe that it's all Joe Jonas's fault and that Sophie is the victim, and a lot of people miss that sometimes both parties are at fault. This also goes back to the fact that just because a person is a woman, people have this idea that they're the victim. And I'm trying to get to the truth of the matter, or give the most balanced approach. I do think that by what she did with Taylor Swift publicly, she was at the very least trying to send a message. She was trying to send a message. Here's another odd part of the story. September 21st, 2 days after Sophie met up with Taylor Swift, Sophie sues Joe Jonas. The lawsuit was filed asking that Joe return their children to England, and even alleging that Joe Jonas had wrongfully removed or detained their children. I pulled up this lawsuit. It was really important to me to be able to read the actual document myself. So I'll give you a brief overview, and some things are really tricky here. In the lawsuit, Sophie states that they had agreed to make England the family's permanent residence in December 2022. The lawsuit also states that Joe, quote, refuses to return the kids' passports to their mom and refuses to send the kids to England, end quote. It's important to keep in mind, however, that the kids were born in the United States and they have spent the majority of their lives here in the United States. The lawsuit states, over the Christmas holiday in 2022, the family spent time in England, near the mother's parents' home. During their time in England over Christmas, the mother and father jointly decided they would look for their forever home in England. This is important because Sophie is claiming that they made moves to actually purchase a home in England, and that they had together decided that they were going to spend their lives in England and establish that as the children's permanent home. Time will tell how valid all of this is. If Sophie actually has the receipts and the contracts that they allegedly signed to buy this home in England, I think that might give her case more validity. Here is where the tricky part comes in. In the lawsuit, Sophie Turner claims that things changed when she decided to take on a major role in a production, a 6-part drama series for ITVX, which was being filmed in the United Kingdom. And she goes on to explain how this changed the situation in the lawsuit. The lawsuit states, the mother plays the main character in the series. The role is the first significant role the mother has taken on since having the children. So Sophie apparently took off time to raise her young children, and now she's getting back into her career, and this is her first major role since staying home with her children, which would be a big deal to any mother. Essentially, because of this new role for Sophie Turner, she was going to be so busy, wouldn't have much time to see or take care of her children during the daytime. It continues by saying, when the father is on tour, although his evenings are busy performing, he has periods of the day to spend with the children. With some hesitation, the parties planned and agreed that it would be best for the children to travel with the father and the father's nanny to the US for the month of August, with the mother traveling to meet the family in the US in September 2023. It sounds like together, because Sophie's schedule was going to be so busy with her new role, they decided mutually that Joe should take the kids to the US and see them as much as possible during the daytime, because most of his work was going to be happening with shows later on in the evenings. The party's agreed plan was that when the mother finished filming on September 14th, she would travel to New York to collect the children and return back home to England. So the plan began, and the children went with the father and the nanny back to the US. But as the lawsuit states, the breakdown of the parents' marriage happened very suddenly. Parties had an argument on August 15th, and on September 1st, the father filed for divorce against some mother in Florida. The lawsuit ends by stating that on September 19th, the father's Florida attorney confirmed that the father will not return the passports to the mother and will not consent for the children to return home to England. On September 20th, 2023, the mother has submitted her Hague Convention application seeking the return of the children to England. The father has prevented the children from returning, which is a breach of the mother's rights. My initial reaction to all of this is, yes, you had a plan in place, but that plan in place was assuming that you were married. Just like their whirlwind love story, it seems like their divorce is being a whirlwind of pain. All of these agreements with moving to England and buying a house there, raising their children there, it was all under the assumption that these two would be happily married. But now, with their sudden divorce and messy custody battle, I think it's important that we realize things about their circumstances have changed. Of course, Joe is not going to want his children to be living in the UK full-time now that they're not married anymore, because his whole family and his whole career and his whole life is in the United States. So I think for Sophie to claim, because we agreed on this when we were married, we have to stick to this, doesn't really fit the bill for me. Personally, it certainly doesn't mean that the law is going to see it that way. And it does seem like the majority of people have just taken Sophie's side in this case without considering any other potential details. Where I think that this situation and most situations in life are probably more nuanced. If people did more research, they would realize that after Joe Jonas filed for divorce September 1st, the Florida court entered an order restricting both parents from relocating the children. So Sophie was served with this court order on September 6th, more than 2 weeks before she sued Joe for wrongfully detaining the children. If this is true, Sophie's lawsuit really doesn't make sense, because if this is true, and it seems like it is true, the Florida court is who is retaining the children, not Joe. The Florida court is preventing either parent to relocate the children at this time. Fail to see why Sophie could have any realistic argument here. She should be suing the court in Florida. That's not to say Joe Jonas hasn't made a lot of poor decisions, but from a legal standpoint, I don't understand how she could successfully win this lawsuit. It's not Joe Jonas's decision at this point. As it stands, if Sophie were to take the children to the UK, if Joe Jonas were to give her the passports to take the children to the UK, they would both be violating this Florida court order. As you can probably tell, one thing is really, really obvious. This situation is getting really messy really fast. And no one seems to be focused on what the best interest is for these children. Knowing this information, which I think has been largely kept out of the story, makes Sophie Turner's lawsuit, which actually uses the term abduction, not only misleading and not only exploitative of the legal system, but also potentially the result of more sinister motives. I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying this is something that could be going on. I have to wonder whether Sophie was filing this lawsuit claiming international abduction to create a smear campaign against Joe Jonas. It's possible. I'm gonna get so much heat for this, but while everything I've seen and read seems to be dragging Joe through the flames, with various commenters going so far as to mention that Joe Jonas was a narcissistic abuser. I want to question everything. So when I see cases like this, maybe there is a part of me that just identifies with the father and wonders whether or not Sophie is so innocent and so victimized as everyone is claiming. I don't know the truth here. I'm just speculating, but I do mention this to emphasize that sometimes what seems like the obvious truth is actually a lie. And as previously mentioned, I do think it's more nuanced. I think it's possible that both Joe and Sophie have some role to play in how this occurred. Here's what I can take away from this case as it stands. It does seem like Joe and Sophie are angry at each other. In my opinion, it does seem as if both Joe and Sophie are failing to consider what is best for their children. This has been getting really ugly, and this is kind of a classic case. This is what happens when parents are too angry at each other to consider the impact it will have on their children. People are claiming that Joe is using the children as weapons. People are claiming that Joe had been planning this for several months. From a legal standpoint, for an international abduction claim or custody case based on the Hague Convention treaties and all the research I've done, it seems like this will hinge on where the kids have resided, especially the past year, particularly the past 6 months. Sadly enough, I think we can all understand that it's almost entirely impossible to be a present and involved parent, logistically speaking, if your kids live on another continent. All of this has escalated quickly, and I wish the two of them could just take a step back, take a pause, and accept that their little girls, who are only 3 years old and 1 year old, but still, even at a young age, both of those little girls need to have both of their parents in their lives, especially because there haven't been any serious abuse allegations. Both of these people seem to be qualified for parenthood. Joe is fighting for what Joe wants. Sophie is fighting for what Sophie wants. If I was Joe and my whole family, my career, and my whole life was in the US, I would want my kids in the US. And if I were Sophie and my whole life was in the UK, my family and everything was in the UK, I would want my kids in the UK. I do understand this. I do understand how this has become such an issue for them. But what these children need is for their parents to be focused on what's best for the children. Ultimately, I think what this really messy custody dispute shows us is that during acrimonious splits, it truly is, more often than not, the children who are going to suffer the consequences. I really do fear that some degree of parental alienation is happening here. Thankfully, the kids are young, but as the kids get older, sadly, it is common for one parent or even both to badmouth, criticize the other parent, ultimately psychologically manipulating the child to reject the other parent if they're angry enough at that other parent and wanting the child all to themselves. Even bad-mouthing the other parent in front of the children can cause the children to become fearful, afraid, or angry at their other parent. In extreme cases, it can certainly lead to the child rejecting their other parent. Knowing this on a personal level, I really hope that for these children's sake, these two can come to a custody agreement. The sooner the better, and put their hatred aside, put their anger aside, and realize they need to do what's best for their children. So that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in learning more about parental alienation, I have tons of videos here on YouTube. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section on what you think is happening. I just really love to get the word out about parental alienation so that the children who are going through it, especially in severe cases, can figure out what's happened to them and learn the truth and wake up, and then they can start to heal.